Okay, this is practice exam question 20, and it's really the final quantitative question. I'm not going to go over the theory-based questions in video form. So practice exam question 20, it says, which stock is a better investment? And it tells us that stock A has expected returns of 30% and a standard deviation of 45%. B, return of 15 and a standard deviation of 25. Stock C, return of 20 and a standard deviation of 20. Stock D, a return of 50 and a standard deviation of 75. The risk-free rate in the economy is effectively zero. Okay, so given this information, what we can do is look at the stock's expected returns versus its expected total risk or its standard deviation. So remember what standard deviation represents total risk. Okay? And total risk is that systematic risk that we cannot diversify away plus the unsystematic risk that we can diversify away. So given this information, we can compare the returns versus the risk. Essentially what we're getting is a measure of risk adjustment. It's a risk adjustment measure. Okay? So obviously, what you're typically looking for in an investment is the highest return that you can possibly get compared to the risk that you are accepting by investing in that stock. So since standard deviation is total risk, we can calculate a measure looking at expected returns divided by total risk, or expected return divided by standard deviation. Okay? And this is what we call a Sharpe ratio. Okay? It's a Sharpe ratio when we go a step further and we do expected return minus the risk-free rate divided by total risk. Why do we subtract the risk-free rate? Because that's the return that we can earn risk-free. So we want to be comparing just the risk that we are accepting above the risk-free rate. Okay? Well, here in this question, it tells us that the risk-free rate in the economy is effectively zero. So if we calculate this for every single stock, we have stock A. So we can say stock A is 30% minus 0%, because it's the risk-free rate, is 0% here, divided by 45%, and we can see that stock A has a Sharpe ratio. This is called the Sharpe ratio. The Sharpe ratio is 0.66. Typically, what you want to see is something around 1, above 0.9, but if you can get around 1 or above 1, that's usually considered a great investment. So stock B is going to be 15% minus 0% risk-free rate divided by 25%. And stock B is 0.6, so it's a little worse than stock A. Stock C is 20% return minus 0% divided by 20% standard deviation. So stock C is looking pretty good. It has a Sharpe ratio of 1 times. And then stock D is 50%, so pretty high return, minus the risk-free rate of 0% over a standard deviation of 75%, so a really high total risk number. And we come up with a Sharpe ratio of 0.667. Okay, so using this measure here, and this is the measure to remember for a question like this, what do we choose? Well, stock C has the highest Sharpe ratio, meaning it provides the highest reward per unit of risk that we are taking on by investing in it. So stock C is going to be our selection for which stock is the better investment. So I'm going to say stock C is the better risk adjusted investment. And stock C is answer B. Okay, so that is question 20.